That's just how simple it is to me. All 12 steps are just basically simple. But the problem is, people don't do it. And I know that because sometimes I forget to do it, I'm not perfect at it. Nobody is. We claim progress, not perfection. There's a whole chapter devoted to the 12th step, working with others. And there's a couple of things in here, A lot of what they're reading in here, a lot of what he's written in here is, it was written at a time when there weren't a lot of halfway houses. There were none. There were no halfway houses, no detoxes, They sent people to the sanitarium or the hospital. And that's where it comes, it actually gives you advice on how to go find somebody who you can help. Like go to sanitariums and go to hospitals and ask the doctors if there's anybody there who's a real bad case and someone that you can help. But here you don't really need that, and you just come to an AA meeting. And I'll be honest with you, I have guys that have worked through steps, and they tell me, they say, well, I've been sober a year now, and I go to meetings, but nobody ever asked me to sponsor them. And I say, well, I'll give you a hint. I'll tell you how to get somebody to ask you to sponsor them, and it's real simple. Don't go to meetings and complain and whine and cry a lot, because who's going to go, hey, that guy's got what I'm looking for. I'm going to go around complaining, crying, and whining a lot. Don't go to AA meetings and, just hang out and smoke out there in the Half Measures Club and hit on the women that just walk in and pick up a white chip. Go to a meeting and talk about the steps. And stay on the step. When you raise your hand, and try to throw some of the things under the bus, which is what I do, that stuff that just... What's that, 90 meetings in 90 days? Hey, that's a great idea, but it ain't going to keep me sober. I suggest you do 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want to do them in 90 meetings in 90 days, that's fine. If you want to empty the coffee or make the coffee and empty the ashtray, we don't have any ashtrays anymore. We used to, but that's all fine and dandy. But what keeps us sober? The only thing we have in here is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what they're designed to do for us is bring us to a place where we have faith in God. And one of the things that's written in here, I got everything highlighted that I really liked about these 15 pages. Chapter 7, Working with Others, in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, is 15 pages long. And some of the things I have highlighted, one of them is on page 93, right in the middle. I'm just going to ramble off a couple of them. There's no real connection here other than I'll explain the 12th step and how simple it is in just a minute. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Another one on page 94 is like a whole paragraph here. It says, outline the program of action. This is me talking to a sponsee that I found in a sanitarium or a hospital, and a doctor has directed me to this guy or whatever. Explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. 94 at the top there. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you're helping him. Make it plain he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. That's basically the whole program right there. The whole idea of faith in God. I tell you, to me, it's not a, one of them ghost-like spooky things where, he's with the tablets and the mountain and the burning bush and all that. It really boils down to this simple thing, and that is when you do good stuff, you feel good about who you are. And when you feel good about who you are and somebody goes, here you go, buddy, have a drink. The very thing that used to make me drink. You see, I know that alcohol took me to a place where I never want to go back. It was a living hell when I was drinking, okay? And that seems to go away when someone says, here, you want a drink, and I'm an active alcoholic. That stuff just doesn't exist for a minute, and I go, well, maybe one. It won't hurt. But I'm going to react sanely this time because I've been doing good things, and I'm feeling good about who I am, and somehow that subconscious way about how I feel, it is a God thing, don't get me wrong. It's not, some kind of scientific thing that keeps me sober. It's a faith in God thing But it's not like the Holy Ghost thing either, where he's standing there patting me on the shoulder. It's a sort of a do good, feel good, do bad, feel bad thing, and that's how simple it really is. Placing the welfare of other people, not really, I don't know if ahead of my own, I ain't got to that point yet, but I do have the constant thought of other people and what I can do for them, and I hope to someday place the welfare of other people ahead of my own, but to be honest with you, I haven't gotten there yet, but that is a goal. They say progress, not perfection, right? I'll be honest with you, I don't know anybody who's gotten to that point, except maybe Pope, what's his name, just kicked a bucket here the other day. 101, right in the middle of the page. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcohol which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So just real quick to explain with the way I understand the 12th step, because it doesn't really give you, it just tells you, basically here, now that you've learned the 12 steps, try to teach them to somebody. So when you're breaking it down and you're looking at it and you see having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I'll be honest with you, for years I looked at that and I said, it was some kind of, like I was saying, one of them freaky things where the burning bush and the tablets with the white-haired guy in the mountain, and it was, like Charlton Heston coming down out of the mountains or something, it was one of them. But no, it wasn't like that. Having had a spiritual awakening, to me, I've come to know that spiritual awakening as something so simple. It's as simple as just explaining what it is that happened to you as a result of the steps. And that is that I was living on self-will. The spiritual awakening is this simple, that I was living on self-will. I was thinking about myself all the time, and I never made that transition from the child to the adult. Somehow I just kept reaching for drinks over all those years. I turned 13, 15, 20, 25, and I began to get older, only I never began exhibiting the behavior of someone who was getting older. Somehow the alcohol just keeps you down. It kept me down. And the spiritual awakening is real simple, that God intended us to go from a child to an adult, and that never happened to me. So in a manner of speaking, you can say that the spiritual part of that, the spiritual awakening part of that, is just an understanding that I never did what He intended me to do, and now it's time to get on this track and do what it was I was supposed to do all along, which is just, grow up. My first sponsor used to really hammer that to everybody. He'd say, look, it's really 12 steps of going from a child to an adult, exhibiting childish behavior and exhibiting adult behavior. But in the same manner, it can be considered like a spiritual awakening, not a religious thing, but one of them, weird things, because it's what God intended me to do all along. I was awakened to the fact that I was not on the right path. That's how simple it is. So I've gone through the steps, and speaking in the past tense, like some of the other steps, like steps 8 and 6, they're speaking in the past tense, Not something that you're going to sit down and do, but something that's already happened to you. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, yeah, that's pretty simple. I tried to carry this message to alcoholics. And there's no other message other than the exact message that we just discussed of the spiritual awakening, was that as a result of the 4th step, I see and I understand. I'm not saying, well, I read Bill Wilson's 4th step, and I'm not so sure that I'm selfish and I'm self-centered. No, I read my 4th step. I wrote down my family's names, my mother and father, my grandparents, my brother, my cousins and uncles and friends and family and co-workers and everybody that I grew up with. And I saw the names of those people that I had been with in my life, and I said to myself one day, I might have said it early on. I might have said, well, that might have been what happened to you. That might have been what was your problem. But I'm really not convinced that's what's wrong with me. If I could just go back to the good old days when I could, control my drinking, and they say, yeah, just keep coming back, And having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I tried to carry that message to alcoholics. The message of step 4 is an inventory. There's no underlying principle to step 4. There's no, I don't know, we don't even have them in here, but they got, brotherly love, and I don't know where that stuff comes from, but once again, I like to throw things like that under the bus once I learned I could do something like that. I used to think, whatever you do, don't badmouth anything when you get to AA, not even that, halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and man, I was going to write all that stuff down. Man, I had to start writing them down somewhere. Just don't drink and go to meetings. Identify, don't compare. Utilize, don't analyze. Why? Well, you can't utilize it and analyze it. Identify, don't compare. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I've not found one person who could explain that to me, or the fact that you need to work the first step 100%. There's so much stuff that over the years, the more you learn about the steps, the more you learn just how simple they really are, the more you'll see how that halfway house and rehab and detox stuff somehow is creeping in here. And everybody goes, "Good evening, family." And I go, "Family?" Look, I mean, it's a great term. I don't know where you got that at, but my family's real small now. And I mean, I consider myself to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but that still kind of creeps me out, that family thing. Practicing these principles in all my affairs. Carry this message to alcoholics. The principle behind the 4 steps. So you go to another alcoholic and you say, look, the principle behind the 4th step is not, what do they call it? I think it's honesty. Honesty is a great principle. And I'm not going to tell you that, hey, you don't need honesty around here. But that's not the principle behind the step. The principle behind the 4th step is an inventory to find and be rid. The way it puts it in the big book, I'll even read it for you so you don't think it's like my opinion, you're not sitting there going, it's another one of his opinions. How it works, right at the end of how it works, actually before the 4th step. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. The common manifestations of self. The 3rd step says it could have little effect. The 3rd step could have little effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us from doing God's will. And that's what the 4th step is. It's not, I come to the meeting, it's an 11-step meeting, and every week they introduce it as the 11th-step prayer. And they say, will somebody read the 11th-step prayer? And it's really not the 11th-step prayer. The 11th-step prayer, if you'll read it, it says something along the lines, upon awakening, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially that it be devoid of self. And that's pretty much how simple it is. Today when I wake up, I say, God, help me find what you want me to do, and help me to try and be rid of self. Stay on top of this selfish, self-centered thing and be free of it. Because it puts me in a much better place to think and do things for others, which is the whole basis of the Alcoholics Anonymous program. Which, the only way that I could explain it is to say that it's not like that Holy Ghost thing I was just talking about. It's the thing where you just do good and you feel good. So when I do things for other people, somehow there's an underlying unconscious way that I feel about myself. And it's just, I feel like I'm okay now. I feel like I'm not a piece of dirt. Whereas before, I had no idea that I was hurting people and stepping on people's toes and treating people like shit and using them. And I had no idea that it made me feel so bad about myself that I was always miserable. I was always afraid. I was always angry at somebody. And those are the 2 main things of the 4th step, is anger and fear. And I got to tell you, I remember I was at a halfway house, and they gave us one of them pieces of paper that had like 100 positive feelings on this side and negative feelings, and I thought, wow, here we go. I got some recovery stuff now. And I found like 2 of them on there. I found like angry and fear, and I was like, well, I see 2 of them on there anyway. And they'd say, as you go throughout the day, circle the ones that you feel. And I thought, what? Now that I look back on it, I'm like, man, them people were clueless. It's so sad. It really is. We got the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous here, and the people in the halfway house somehow felt that they could not take us or explain to us any of the steps or what the program of action that we have was based on. And that is, that you get this idea that God wanted you to do something, so you go out and do it. You feel good about yourself for doing it. And when somebody says you want to drink, you somehow, I don't know where it comes from either, all I can tell you is it's faith in God. You react sanely when someone says, do you want to drink it? And you go, you don't want me drinking, trust me. You have no idea. And they go, oh, I know you, yeah. I don't know you personally, but I've met one of you guys before. It's real simple for me. I tell people that, and you'd be surprised at the answer you get sometimes, and that is, unless they're like somebody that knows you or something, they're just dicking around with you. But, so, practice these principles in all my affairs. Now that is really so simple that it eluded me for years. I used to say, practice what principle in all my affairs? Well, first of all my affairs are quite simply, I get up, I run and brush through my hair and brush my teeth and go out the door, and I work for like 9 or 10 hours every day, and then I come home, take a shower, and I come here, or I go to another AA meeting, or I go see a friend and hang out and watch TV or something stupid, and it's never like, and I'm not like some CEO of a company or something. So my affairs are so simple that all I have to do is think about those things that I do on a daily basis and practice what principle in those affairs. Well, the principles of the steps were pretty simple. Is basically we're talking about 4 through 9, because 1, 2, and 3 are a gift given to us from what it is that we've been through. You really can't practice like 1, 2, and 3 on a daily basis. Turning your will and your life over to the care of God, you can just by doing 4 through 9. But if you look at step 10 again, 4 through 9 are lumped together in that one step right there. So you're doing the inventory to find and be rid of the things that are blocking me from doing things for other people. 4 is to recognize it and write it down. 5 is to share it with somebody else. And I always tell my sponsees, they say, I have to share something with somebody else when I do it. I say, not really. The way I look at it is all you have to really do is admit that you're being selfish, or you're fearful or afraid or angry or something. Because a lot of people will call me on the phone, my sponsees, and they'll start giving me all these details and go on for minutes and minutes. And I say, look, the details really aren't important. All you have to do is admit the exact nature of your wrong, which is, the exact nature would be resentment, fear, selfishness, dishonesty. I could almost call my sponsor once a month and go, yep, I'm still resentful, fearful, selfish, and dishonest, because my sobriety is not between me and my sponsor anymore. It's between, he still has things to offer me. He'll say something every once in a while I hear at a meeting, and I'll go, hey, that made a lot of sense. And that was pretty good, But, I hung around him for a couple of years when I first went through the steps with him, and then I found out he wasn't, superhuman. He was just another guy in the meeting, really. So he couldn't keep me sober. My sobriety was between me and God. So the practicing of these principles in all my affairs, what that means is to do my inventory when I'm at work, to do my inventory when I'm at home, when I'm here at the AA meeting, when I'm at a buddy's house doing something, when I'm going to have dinner or see a movie. Practice the principles in all my affairs basically says, do your inventory every day, and whatever it is that you're doing in life. Practice the principles is the inventory of the 4th step, the sharing of that selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear with somebody. Anybody could be standing in line and go, hey, I'm real angry about something right now. And that's pretty much it. I don't need to say, the 5-page details of what it is that I'm doing. I don't believe that anyway. Because I don't know about you guys, but you get 5 or 6 sponsees calling you all the time, it gets pretty old. That's what I tell a lot of my sponsees too, is look, man, I'm only human. I get 15 years, but that ain't, trust me, when you get 15 years, you'll see it ain't that big a deal. I used to look up to adults when I was a kid, and I'd say, wow, what it was to become an adult and be, the wisdom of all these years. Now I'm like 40 years old, and I'm going, man, what the hell was wrong with me when I was a kid? I thought people who were 40 years old were like old and wise and had it all together, and now that I'm here, I'm like, phew. Man, I could use another 100 years when I get through with this 100, But, so to practice is real simple. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, the spiritual awakening being that I was not becoming the person that God intended me to be. I had remained a child, and I refused to grow up, and alcohol was it was what was keeping me down, I guess. It was helping me stay down. When I was supposed to be dealing with these resentments and fear in an adult way, I turned to alcohol, and it anesthetized that fear. Because all resentment is based in fear also. That's another, even though resentment is the number one offender, it's a real important for me to understand that whenever I get angry about something, it's something that I'm afraid of. That helps a lot of it go away. It really does. Anyway, that really is how simple the 12th step is, but there's something else here, and that is that the 11th step is just before the 12th step. And in order for me to go out and do things for other people, I first have to take my inventory and be free of... That's one other thing I'd like to point out in all my meetings, is to apply the solution. There must have been years before I actually heard somebody say that. And you know what they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I really don't recall anybody saying it before that point. That somehow... I remember hearing, we have a solution, but it was never It was never the details of forgiveness, faith in God, and amends. Those are the three solutions that we have, and those are the three most important things in my life today. I don't remember people saying things like that. Maybe they did. I don't know. Sometimes I look at it like the meetings that I went to, there just weren't a whole lot of sober people in there. Maybe, and the one or two that were in there, maybe they had so many sponsees that every time they opened their mouths, guys would swarm them or something, so they stopped. Because I do that every once in a while too. I'll sit in the meeting and go, no, I got like 3 or 4 guys that are calling me pretty regular. And someone goes, do you want to share? And I do the same thing my sponsor used to do. I go, no, tonight's the night I don't say nothing. I pick one night out of the week, and that's what. First time he said that, I go, I think I know why too. It's a room full of halfway house guys that just got piped in, and like 20 of them just stepped off the boat, And he knew if he said something, like 8 or 9 of them were going to line up and go, hey, can I get your number? In order for me to carry the message, first thing I have to do is live it in my life, It's like if somebody knows how to build, diesel engines or something. He's been working on diesel engines for 20 years, and another guy comes up and knows nothing about diesel engines and is going to tell him about compression or something like that, or glow plugs or whatever, boosters or some shit like that. What do they call them? The blowers, superchargers or blowers or something. And the guy that knows something about it is going to know that this guy doesn't know anything. And the longer I'm sober, the more I can see just how few people actually do understand the steps. And it's not a resentment that I have, but I think it's pretty sad sometimes, I sit in a meeting, I was listening to some guy the other day, said he had 20 years, and I'd swear to God he was picking up a white chip that night or something. Until he said he had 20 years, I thought he was like one of the white chippers or something, because he just didn't sound too sober, He was one of them guys that came in the meeting and started complaining and telling everybody about his day and how bad it was. And the first thing I could think of was, you're supposed to go to God with that stuff, not a room full of suffering drunks. Half the room didn't know what the hell to do with it, I'll be honest with you. If I was sitting in that room looking for a sponsor and that guy said he had 20 years, I'd have said, well, he sure doesn't have anything I'm looking for. The steps really are that simple. And I don't know what separates the people who get sober and stay sober from the people who, the willingness. I don't know. I've seen people go through. I'll be honest with you, I got a couple of friends that hang around here in the Bottom Line. I've been a member of the Bottom Line for about 11 years now. And I know 2 or 3 people that are still bouncing in and out after 11 years, and I can't think, but if anybody had enough willingness, don't you think one of these people had just been beaten to death for the whole 10, 11 years that I've been in here? And I can no more tell you why they still going out and drinking, once every 2 or 3 months and getting beat up and losing everything. And then somebody else comes in who's maybe a couple of years in and out like myself. I had known a couple of years of recovery before I actually got it, but I remember the desperation that I felt. The, what do they call it, the incomprehensible demoralization that I felt like, all I could really do is share my experience, my personal experience with the steps, and that was that I really felt like I was either A, done with alcohol and drugs, or B, done with life, one of the two. And it just so happened at that particular time in my life, I was given a little help by Nick Navarro, who at that time was our sheriff here in Broward County. And, that wasn't the first time either. I had been to jail with Nick Navarro's gang 10 times for, little stuff and a couple of big things. Breaking and entering and stuff like that, and grand theft auto, and I don't know, I must have about, 10 or 12 arrests that were, jail time stuff. A couple of, months here and there. But I, for the life of me, don't know what keeps people from doing this, because I try to explain to everybody just how simple it really is. The simplicity of just all you got to do is think about other people and do things for other people and not expect something in return. But we have this little program of action that we're going to do, in which the action involved really boils down to writing down my behavior and applying the solution to that behavior to be free of selfishness so that I can better do things for other people. It really is no more complicated than that. And for the life of me, I don't know why some people just don't seem to get it, but I think it has something to do, my personal opinion, and that's all it is. I think it just has something to do with, the God thing. Some people just, I don't know, I had the God thing many years before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. My personal opinion with the idea of God was that I had a God of my own understanding 10 years before I got sober. But when somebody said to me that you're supposed to be completely dependent and reliant upon God for everything, that's when it dawned on me. I said, really? My experience with it was that I felt that God, was like a father. He got you here, and now I got too much pride to go ask Dad for anything, so I just said, okay, God, you got me here. Now I'll take it from here. I'm going to be a man about this. And then when somebody said, well, you got to be completely reliant upon God for everything. So the idea for me today is that everything that happens is God's job, and all I have to do is concentrate on what He intended me to do. Instead of being a burden on society, I'm supposed to be contributing to it. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what separates people who get sober from the ones who get drunk. I don't know. That's a question I've been trying to answer for the better part of 15 years, but I'll be honest with you, I don't think there is an answer, other than the fact that, another one of the most important things I ever heard somebody say, I don't think it was one of those preacher guys like Zeke or Pastor Bob or whatever his name was. He said, that God gave each and every one of us our own free will, basically so we could come to Him of our own free will. Because if we'd be no different than the animals if we were just forced to do God's will when we were born and we didn't have any choice in the matter. So what we do is God, designs and makes people and puts them on, earth, and then He says, do whatever you want to, and then waits to see if we come back, and that's pretty much all it boils down to, is you come back to God and you say, phew, I get it now. Selfishness and self-centeredness is no way to be living in a society full of other people. You've got to be a part of that society. You've got to give, and you've got to be interactive with all the people in your life. You can't just think about yourself, and that's pretty much how simple it really is for me today. Is thinking about myself got me to the point that I didn't even want to live anymore, and now thinking about God's will gets me to the point that I want to be 100 years old. I want another 100 years. This growing old shit ain't for me. I don't know about you guys, but all of a sudden I don't like it. So that's 30 minutes. I'll open up the floor for anybody who would like to share their experience with Step 12. And Step 12 really is quite simple as it says. Just what it is that I've learned in these 12 steps, I try to teach to somebody else. And I have sponsees who say, well, maybe I haven't been through the steps enough. I don't know enough about them. I go, well, nobody ever knows everything about the steps. I mean, even Bill Wilson probably didn't know everything. When he took his sponsees through the steps, maybe he said the same thing as, well, maybe I need to practice a little more, rehearse, go read up a little more. I get sponsees with a couple of months of sobriety, and I tell them, look, when you go to meetings, don't go in there and tell everybody your problems and dump on them like your other sponsor told you. This is the way I look at it. You called your sponsor up. They really didn't want to talk to you in the first place, and you're saying, wah-ha, boo-hoo, this, cray, wah-ha, boo-hoo. And he says, instead of saying, I don't feel like listening to that crap, I'm not really in the mood to listen to you crying and whining, he said something like, I'll tell you what, why don't you go to a meeting and dump? And that's basically where that came from. That's the only place that I can think of that it came from, was that someone just really didn't want to hear that crap, so they sent you to a meeting. Maybe somebody in that meeting was going to say, that's part of your problem, is you're coming to meetings and dumping. Instead of thinking about what you could put into that meeting, you came in and you thought what you could get from that meeting. And I didn't want to throw that under the bus for years until I heard somebody say it and a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, man, that made more sense than you have any idea. Because I spent years in Alcoholics Anonymous with resentments going, here comes another one, I know this guy when he speaks, all he ever does is cry and whine and piss and moan. So now I raise my hand in meetings and I say, it's in your best interest not to. It's in your best interest to think about the people in that room and say, well, they're only human beings. Even if some of them have 20, 30, 40 years, what does that make them immune to hearing somebody pissing and moaning all the time? I don't know about you, but it doesn't make me immune to it. And I usually do. I let my sponsees ramble on a little bit, and I'll stop them right in the middle of it, and then, I'll say, well, wait a minute. It sounds a lot to me like this could fit right into that inventory we learned all about. Because that's what it boils down to. It really does. It boils down to applying the solution to be free of that fear, applying the solution to be free of that resentment, to forgive those people for what you feel they've done, and to do things for other people, to get out of yourself. And then, it's just like coming to a meeting and dumping is like the snowball going downhill. It's perpetuating the problem. And It wasn't until I heard that one day that I said, okay, now instead of sitting around being resentful about people who are crying and whining all the time, I'm going to go to other meetings and I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to tell them, look, it's not rocket science. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. So that's another part of the message that I try to carry, because, and there's a lot of other things like I was writing down here in the back of my book. I've still got a whole bunch of them to write down too. One of these days I'll finish it up. The identify, don't compare. I have yet to find somebody who could explain that to me, and I have heard that so many times over the years. When I was early in sobriety, I thought there was something complicated to that. Somehow these people were wise and they knew what they were talking about, and that there was smart people in AA, and one of them said, identify, don't compare, and I was scratching my head, too afraid to ask anybody what something like that meant. And that's only one. I bet there's 100 of these things floating in AA meetings that will do nothing but confuse me. All they do is they throw more stuff on top of this pile, more and more and more. And I've had some new sponsees come to me and say things, they would just, I wish I could remember them all right now, but I'm kind of, a little bit tired, and I got something in my eye, and it's kind of bugging the hell out of me right now. But some of my sponsees will tell me things from other sponsors, and I'll tell them right then, I say, throw that mindless tripe out, forget about all that stuff you've been listening to in meetings, and concentrate on what I'm trying to teach you right now. Because what I'm going to try to teach you is in this book, and it's not some stuff that's coming from the halfway houses, this identify, don't compare, just don't drink and go to meetings. Man, if I could do that, I wouldn't need this place. Utilize, don't analyze, there's a whole bunch of them, man. I didn't even start on my list. Human solutions, that's what Jim B. used to call them. What do we know about human solutions? Human solutions don't work. What is utilize, don't analyze, identify, don't compare, and halt, hungry, angry? Don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Now, angry is one you don't need to get to. But I don't know about lonely and tired and hungry. Them things never made me drink. They still don't make me drink today. I'm convinced at it anyway. My brain has been washed, and that's another one of them things I heard people say. But it's more like a funny thing, The people in AA, they're trying to brainwash you, and then somebody else would raise their hand and go, yeah, well, the way you were thinking, pal, your brain could use a little soap and water, don't you think? So, I don't know, it's a real simple step. And like I said, it's just some people go to meetings and they throw things into Alcoholics Anonymous that just don't really need to be here. And that's fine if someone's got a lot of sobriety, someone who knows the difference between what is sobriety, which is the inventory and the solutions we apply, and the prayer to ask God to show me the way, and the doing of things for others, the helping them through the steps. And the sponsor I have right now, who I really don't see that often, he lives in Port St. Lucie now. He moved away from Broward County a while back. But he told me, he said, alcoholics aren't the only people in the world. You got all these other people in your life that you can do things for. However, doing things for alcoholics is extremely important for me, because I'll be honest with you, I've learned more from taking people through the steps than I've had things come up in my head that I heard somewhere in a meeting. I go, I don't know where that came from, but I know it didn't come from me. And then, I'll highlight it and underline it in the book or something, and I know that all this stuff that's in my head just comes out even more so when I'm taking people through the steps. I'll remember stuff out of the blue and I'll write it down, Things that are like real important in sobriety, and things that are in the book here, not the important stuff. Like, we asked him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be at once we commenced to outgrow fear. That's really one of the most important things I've ever heard. And then the 9th step, the 12 steps in one sentence is, at the moment we're trying to put our lives in order about the 9th step, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And then the 12th step, where we were just at here. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Anyway, like I said, the 12 steps are simple. It's just that, so many people just don't do it, I guess. I don't know. It ain't none of my damn doings, It's just one of those things about when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. That's the only thing I can come up with. Whenever I see somebody who's gone through years and years of in and out and white shift and getting beat up and coming back in and losing everything, and just year after year of this thing. I really don't see it the same way as I used to. I'd say, hell, that's so sad. I can't stand seeing people. It's hard to watch somebody I know, someone who's a friend, go through all that. But today I understand it because it happened to me. I look back and I say, well, it took everything it took for me to get where I am today. I'm glad I didn't get cancer or a tumor or anything like that when I was out there, because it's pretty much been long enough that if I had, it'd set in by now. But I know some people who are like, using needles and stuff, and they keep asking, I don't know if I got HIV or hepatitis or cancer or anything like that. And the only thing I can say is it took me what it took me to get in here, and it's taken them what it's taken them to get in here. And even if it kills them, hopefully before they die, they'll show up to God and say, okay, I get it now, But, that's more like one of them philosophies of life thing, or what do they call it when you're talking about God? I forget that word. I'm going to go ahead and start on next week. I'm going to do step 1 again. And just to summarize real quick, remember this 12 step, we're talking about sponsorship, basically. Just it's pretty much what it's saying here. When you go back to the 11th step, is it coincidence that in the 11th step you're saying, ask God what He wants you to do? It's pretty much what it says. It's like an English way of saying. So you just turn to God and say, what do you want me to do? And then, here we got step 12, and it says, well, in a sense, you found your way to God. Help somebody else who doesn't know the way find their way to God. And it's a real strange way of saying maybe each and every one of us has the opportunity to, not to be offensive or anything, but be some kind of preacher in an AA sort of way of, And it's what I do a lot of times. I'll pat people on the back and I go, what you're looking for is right over here, right this way. And God is just simple as doing these steps to feel good about who you are. And one of the things that I tell my sponsees too, I want to throw that out there because this is about sponsorship, is, why would you limit yourself to one sponsor? Unless you thought that, maybe somehow they were going to contradict each other, and you'd be going to this one and going, but my other sponsor says this, and you go, well, then don't do that. Just use your brain and take 2, 3, 4 sponsors and ask all of them to take you through the steps. Get as much information as you can. I tell my sponsees too, when we go through the steps, anytime you want to go back and ask a question or redo or talk about any one of the steps, feel free to talk about them. At no point would I tell my sponsee, hey, we're on step 10 tonight, and he says, well, what about step 6? And you go, nah, we did step 6 3 or 4 weeks ago. You had your opportunity to ask me about step 6. That time has passed, and you can no longer ask any questions. That's ridiculous. So at any time, I tell my sponsees too, if we get through it all 12 steps and you want to go back over all of them again or review one of them or review some of them or just, maybe lump them all in one big couple of hours, we'll sit together and go over them again. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. Because I would rather spend time, I tell you, I've taken maybe 150 guys into the 4th step, and maybe 20 of them, 15 of them have done the 4th step and brought it back to me. So, I'd rather get to step 12 and go back over them with someone who's already been through them than, take one more guy into step 4 for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and never see him again. Who you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. Now, what is the teaching of I'm going to throw that under the bus because that's one of the worst things. That bugged me when I had 3 weeks of sobriety. I couldn't stand that. I wanted to go tell everybody I was in AA. I wanted everybody to know I had a shot at it now and I was getting sober. But I could understand how some people would come in here and didn't want other people knowing that they were in AA. And in my opinion, that's like common sense. That's human behavior. You can't dictate stuff like this to somebody. But what this is saying here, first of all, I read it and Bill Wilson wrote it. Bill Wilson wrote it down somewhere, and they'd had it in the grapevine. It was the December grapevine because the 12th month is the 12th step and the 12th tradition in the grapevine. And, January is the first step and the first tradition. So I was reading what Bill Wilson had written about it, and it was pretty long-winded and pretty complicated, and Dr. Bob had written something very short and simple and to the point. And it was what anonymity meant. He said, they asked him, why did you write anonymity? Just what do you perceive anonymity to be in Alcoholics Anonymous? And the way I looked at it was, the 12 steps teach us to be free of fear. That fear is our biggest enemy as alcoholics. It is the reason we drink. And then we turn right around and read this to them. What you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. Is that not a statement based in fear? A statement that says, don't tell anybody you heard or saw me in here, but you got to be free of fear, It's almost like it's an oxymoron. It doesn't exist, in my opinion. To read anonymity as the spiritual foundation of all of our traditions. And what Bill Wilson said about that was that anonymity was meant to be kept on my personal level, at the level of press, radio, and films, because what Bill Wilson was doing was going around and speaking for, the Saturday Evening Post or whatever it was. He was going to colleges and magazines and newspapers, and they were paying him, and they were introducing him as the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, the man who wrote the book, and he felt like he was just a tool of, an implement of God when he wrote it down. He didn't feel like it was really his idea, just something that came in his head. And I guess one day he had this vision at the end of AA, if it ever did come, would come from that form of everybody taking credit and being, here's the vice president and the president. I was at a meeting the other night, and this guy who had like 22 years got up in front of the meeting, and he goes, my name is so-and-so, and in case you didn't know, I'm the president of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got a good laugh out of that, too, myself, because I was like, that was pretty funny, man. Because I think he understood that. The thing was that anonymity was only meant to be kept at the level of press, radio, and films. And if some guy, this is how it works, if some guy comes in here and says, I was cheating on my wife and it was with her best friend, and then one of her friends is in here and goes out and tells him, that's common sense, that's human behavior. You should have took it to your sponsor or something, not a room full of people, How stupid could I be to tell all you people something I didn't want somebody else to know? And then to say, well, what you see here, what is this? Ain't group therapy. I've been to group therapy. That stuff was pretty bad, man. I never got anything out of it. Like he was saying, the thing with the feelings, Well, how did that make you feel? I can't tell you how many times I heard my counselor tell me that. That little chair he had would creak when he leaned back. And he'd go, well, how did that make you feel? And it would be usually something during the day at work, and I was real mad about something. Well, I don't know. Mad was the only thing I could come up with when I had 6 months of sobriety. But, so back to the anonymity thing, this being the 12th step in the 12th tradition here. This is not part of Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't say it up there. Look at where it stops. It says, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all of our traditions, ever reminding us to place the principles of the Alcoholics Anonymous and helping other people and doing things for others above my personality of the president of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to go to the press, the radio, and films and tell them who I am when next week they're going to kick my ass out, Tell me I'm back demoted to going to a meeting and being just a regular old person again. But I always used to say, hey, what that means is nobody gets to be president of AA. And they asked Dr. Bob, they said, what are your thoughts on anonymity? And Dr. Bob said, well, anonymity was meant to be kept in one place and one place only, at the level of press, radio, and films. Not above the level of press, radio, and films, and not below the level of press, radio, and films, but at the level. And any time we try to dictate this behavior to people, it doesn't make any sense. I just wanted to say that because that's another one of the things that's irked me all these years. I used to always think, what could I say about something like that without it coming out as, some kind of, I don't know, I always hear people in AA talk about, resentments that they have. Like some girl was in here a while back and got mad and said, I think you got a monopoly on God in here or something, and stormed out the door, and we all looked at each other like, what was that all about? I had no idea. But, I didn't want to sound like that with it until I heard somebody say that, and I read actually what anonymity meant. And it didn't mean you're in line at 7-Eleven and you saw Bob and you go, hey, Bob, from the AA meeting, and all of a sudden the police come in, and they got you in handcuffs and they're taking you to AA jail or something. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to do step 1 next week, and step 1's real simple, and I don't know about that 100% thing. I don't know where that comes from. Oh, I'm going to write that down, too. Step 1 is the only one you need to work 100. Jim B. said, why would you tell somebody that? So they're going to figure they did step 1, they're going to half-ass all the rest of them, Well, it's the only one I had to work 100%. He said, I suggest you do the best you can with all of them. I don't know where that... Another one of them things that just doesn't seem to make any sense. Lumping on that pile of things that does nothing but confuse me and add to... When I was early in sobriety, I used to always have this pile of information in my head that I considered AA information, And I had like these 2 categories of important stuff and check it out to see what it is stuff, and is it mindless tripe stuff. And I don't know, it just seems to me that so many people say a lot of things in Alcoholics Anonymous when we could concentrate on these steps and improve everybody's chances of getting sober, instead of telling everybody identify, don't compare, and just go to meetings and don't drink, instead of, well, you've got 6 months of sobriety, you're not ready to work the steps yet, and you just take it easy and sit down, go to meetings and then dump. My suggestion, I think they said in here, at a second meeting in the 12th step, we were at your second meeting with a man, you take him into the steps. The first meeting, you tell him about yourself and give him the book and say, read it. The second meeting, you take him into the steps, which means step 4. You just tell him about 1, 2, and 3 and go right into step 4, just like Bill Wilson was doing.